squishy cake. I have nothing else to do for this, so. Random brain. This is another one of My Hero Academia discussion videos. This is where I'm going to be talking about the evil doctor from My Hero Academia that works with All for One, Dr. Kyudai Garaki. I apologize if I mispronounced his name. He also has the pseudonym, his fake name of Daruma Ojiko. And he is a villain, of course, associated with the League of Villains, with All for One, with Tomoroshi Garaki, now currently technically associated with the Para-Liberation Army that is connected to, of course, the former Meta-Liberation Army. He is not a nice man. He is a psychotic doctor that has found a kindred spirit in All for One. He is actually over 120 years old, and I can hear the dog outside the door, so I'm going to open the door. Up. 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 Come on! Up. Now, go. Pick. Out or in? Are you in or out? Out. Okay, then. You saw the dog a little bit. Okay, back to this. So, Dr. Garaki, Garaki, I don't remember. Evil doctor, dude. Psychotic doctor. He doesn't actually have like an official villain name. I just refer to him as evil psychotic doctor. As I mentioned, he's over 120 years old, so he was probably given a form of a longevity quirk by All for One, which admittedly, okay, that's pretty smart on All for One's part. If you find a doctor that works really well with you, I don't know if like maybe he was a doctor that All for One met a long time ago, like when he started to build his empire, and then just this doctor was a part of that. Don't 100% know that part about his past, but I would assume that would be the case. In regards to his abilities, he has a genius intellect, which is not really all that surprising if he's a doctor that gained the attention of All for One. That would make perfect sense that he would have a genius level intellect and everything. Particularly when it comes to medical knowledge and everything like that. He is also the one that is basically in charge of creating the Nomus, which I'll be going over a little bit later in the show, But he's mostly in charge of creating them, but he also is part of the experiment to help transplant All for One's quirk into Tomoroshi Garaki as well. So him having a genius level intellect makes perfect sense. He also has like extreme high medical expertise as well, since he was one of the main doctor that restored One for All to his, not previous state, but a better condition, after his huge first battle with All Might. About 5 years or so before the series begins. He's, the one that made it that All for One was able to survive that. If he wasn't around, All for One would probably be dead, which would be a good thing. Well, we would like to think it would be a good thing. Given what we've seen with Tomoroshi Garaki, maybe not. And then in regards to his quirk, in regards to Garaki's quirk, he has a life force quirk that was duplicated by One for All and given to him. This is for the longevity quirk, of course. It allows him, has greatly extended his life and everything, so he's able to, have a more youthful appearance. He still looks old, but he looks, much younger than he actually is. So it's able to help him, stay around One for All and be of use to him with his level intellect. I don't remember if we're ever told whether or not he was just given this quirk as like this is his only quirk, or if he has like another quirk, or maybe he was just like, because he was over 100 years ago, he's over 120 years old. All for One himself is over 100 years old. And we don't know the exact date of like when quirks started to appear in the My Hero Academia world. that it may have been along the lines of like he, you know, was already like a very brilliant doctor, and maybe when quirks started to come about, he was starting to study them, and maybe in regards to that, because in regards to like the past that I have for him for part of his history is that he he was given, he had this quirk. So from my notes that I have here, which I've been over these recently, but he manifested a quirk for the longevity, and then his life force quirk, and then he is also able to, but he made everyone around him believe that he was quirkless. So it's just like, hey, that's a pretty good way of doing that. Pretend that you're quirkless so people don't suspect anything. And then during that time frame, he became a doctor and a scientist, and he's like extreme amount of study on quirks and everything like that, which is pretty much what I suspected of him anyway. And during that time frame, he ended up developing the theory of like the quirk singularity is what it's referred to as. And like he wrote this theory like 70 years ago under probably a different name, one of his other various names that he probably has. And he has used this theory and everything. It was, the theory itself was like dismissed. The basics that I understand is that for the quirk singularity is that with each generation that passes, quirks will become more and more powerful, and eventually they will become uncontrollable. Which, I mean, yeah, I can understand where that would come from. I mean, like, take, All for, or One for All is a very good example. With each user that uses it, it gets stronger and stronger, and to the point where it's like, we know that if like it had been given, like after All Might had it, if he had given it to someone that had a quirk, it would have killed them. Whereas, Izuku was this blank slate for the quirk to help, help him mold the quirk to himself, but also mold him to the quirk. So, you can kind of see that. And, it's hinted that like, Dabi's fire is stronger than Endeavor's fire. And, so they use this, as quirks evolve, that makes sense. So I can kind of see where that idea comes from for the quirk singularity. But, like, that was dismissed by a huge amount of, like, the medical community and such. And, far-fetched doomsday theory. I think part of the quirk singularity is also one of the things that they used that, like, the villain in My Hero Academia World Hero Mission, like the quirk singularity is, I think, one of the things that he uses to justify what he does. The villain in that. And at some point, when Garaki was kind of left alone because like nobody in the medical community wanted anything to do with him, he was approached by All for One and hired, and has been worked with him. The two of them have worked together. I wouldn't say on equal footing, because definitely All for One has more power in that relationship, but I'm sure that like there's a respect between the two of them, that like Garaki is respected by All for One. If he didn't respect him, he wouldn't have kept him around so long. And it probably was, I think it's hinted that like the quirk that like Garaki has, since that's the life extension quirk, that like All for One copied that and then put that into himself, which admittedly, good idea. And we see a bunch of that. Other parts of what we know about his history is that that both of them have been able to live a very long life because of the life force quirk that they duplicated, and they both have. And with Garaki's medical knowledge and everything like that, and like their knowledge of quirks, they've been able to amass this huge empire. Now, in some of the more recent chapters of My Hero, we did get some information about Garaki, and I'll be going over that, or at least about some of his history with other characters. But we know the next interaction that we see with Garaki is actually during Tomura's backstory, during Tenko's backstory, after everything that he has with his backstory with his parents and his sister and his grandparents, with everything that happens there. And then when he's found by All for One, Garaki is there, and Garaki is the one that, preserves the hands of Tomura's grandparents and parents and his sister, and like gives them to him. So he's there when all of that happens, when Tenko is literally having like a mental break moment. I mean, like, I feel sorry for for child Tomura. I do. With everything that happens to him, and that if things had gone differently, he probably would have ended up becoming a very good hero with his quirk. But, you know, he was found by All for One, and he's just been, his hatred for heroes has just been, like, just put on this, like, fast track to just make him worse. And, you know, so Garaki was there during the whole time frame when Tenko was growing up. He's the one that gave him the hands. And, you know, he watches with One for All as Tenko kills like two street thugs that like beat Tenko up at one point, beat Tomura up at one point. He like watches as that happens. And like he's just like, oh yeah, that's fine. He has no problem with this. He's just like perfectly fine with this. You know, he's surprised that Tomura lost his memories about everything that happened. So it's like he knows about Tomura's past, and then later on, when everything happens with the Metal Liberation Army, he's aware that like Tomura is like having all these memories come back to him and everything like that. And I'll go over that. But I would say the next moment that we know about is we know that he was involved with what happened with Dabi, with what happened with Toya. We found that out in very recent chapters. And from my understanding is after Toya had gone to like the hill that was part of the Todoroki residence, and like he practiced there and his fire went out of control, and you know everybody in the family and you know and the police and everything all thought that Tomura died, or thought that Toya died, excuse me, both have T names, sorry, thought that Toya had died. And what actually happened was he was taken, you know, his body was taken very, very, very badly burned all over the place. And for the next, I think it was a couple of months, he's kind of in a coma, and like he goes through surgery after surgery to have like his skin regrafted onto his face, and like different, you know, quirks are probably used to help heal him and everything. And a lot of that was done, we found out that I believe that was done under the supervision of Garaki. And yeah, that's just more twisted stuff. And it's revealed that not just Toya, but other children were being kind of raised to be a substitute if Tomura didn't work out. They were like backups in case Tomura didn't work out. We know eventually Dabi escaped and I think he ended up like coming back and like burning down the facility or whatever, but he escaped, and like everything happened with Dabi and everything. And I'm probably going to do a different video where I do like a discussion on Dabi himself, because I want to, because we got like a bunch of information about Dabi recently. But I also kind of want to wait a little bit until like we get some of that like revealed in the anime, but that's still going to be a ways down the line, so we'll see what happens. But like Garaki revealed this while he's captive, by the currently being held captive by the hero forces. Other bits that we do know about his past is that he was also very integral in bioengineering all of the no-moods. That he is the one that like created all of them. Like he found the people that like All for One used as like the basis to like pile on the quirks. We also know that he was the one that turned Oboro Shirakuno into Kurogiri. That he's the one that took Oboro's body and then manipulated it and then twisted it and then turned it into Kurogiri. And, you know, that means that, you know, President Mike and, President Mike has a huge amount, President Mike and Aizawa have a huge amount of disdain for Garaki, and I don't blame them in the slightest, and I would not feel the slightest bit bad for Garaki in the slightest if he, if President Mike just, like, if President Mike and Aizawa just have fun torturing him at some point, I would be like, I am okay with this. The man deserves it. Now, I don't remember if we ever find out exactly how long it's been that they've been creating the Nomus. I would say it's at least been a couple of years, because one of the guys that we do see as a Nomu later on that becomes the high-end Nomu actually was in My Hero Vigilantes. He was there at one point. And of course, you know, Oboro is a big part of the backstory that we get for Aizawa as well. So we kind of hear about that. And also in regards to, you know, Vigilantes as well, we know that he was a big part of the experiment that made number 6. That is one of the big villains in Vigilantes. So there's that connection there as well, that I think maybe like those experiments that they were doing that we see in Vigilantes are then like predecessors to the Nomus. So I think we kind of see that. It would be kind of my thought to that. But like, he's developed so many different types of Nomus over the years. It's, over the time frame. And, he's the one that develops, the big Nomu that they use to send to JSA, JSU, and Garaki has just been this huge, big, ally of All for One. But the other thing is that he does have this alternate persona where he's like this kindly doctor and everything. And I'm sitting there, and like the first time that he's revealed as this villain, as this evil doctor, I'm like, he looks familiar. Why does he look familiar? And it's like, it's of course he looks familiar because he's the doctor that we see in the first episode of My Hero that tells Izuku and Inko that Izuku is quirkless. He's the one that's sitting there saying, I was like, oh yeah, it's just, you don't have like the extra bone in your toe, so you're quirkless. And it's just like, I wonder, I kind of want to see like Inko see him again and like be like, hey, wait a second. You're my... What? Like, I can just see Inko getting so angry at him. Although there's a lot of fanfics that I've read that, because that he's that same doctor, that he... Like, there's fanfics where it's like, once Izuku is like quirkless, because quirkless people are so rare that they could have tried to like take him and then turn Izuku into a Nomu. And I know there's lots of fanfics that have gone down that way. Which doesn't surprise me. I mean, like, that would have been a very ample opportunity for that to have happened, but we know that doesn't happen. But he is also, this kindly doctor and everything that has like this public persona where he just works at one of the hospitals and everything. But like we see, he's, kind of part of, the JSU incident and everything. He's like continues to like work on, re-engineering the Nomus during the Hero Killer Stain arc. He, has the different Nomus that they get sent out there. He's like part of that in the background, like helping, All for One with his recovery and everything like that when they're dealing with Stain. And then during the Pro Hero arc, he is of course one of the ones that sends the high-end Nomu that goes and fights against Hawks and Endeavor, and then Mirko at the end. Mirko shows up. She's not really part of that big fight, but she shows up and tries to kick Dabi. So I'm still okay with this. But he's also the one that has the ability, that has a Nomu called Johnny. I feel so sorry for these Nomu. He has this little Nomu that he can use to like warp the different the League members to different places. And it's this weird gunky quirk that's just disgusting, and he can use it to like warp them away at times. And they use that for like transportation. And one of the things that happens is, the big part that we get revealed about him for like who he fully on is during the Meta Liberation Army arc, when he is, when he like contacts Tomura, when like him and the League are on the run and everything, and he explains, they're fighting Gigantomachia because, he's revealed that, Gigantomachia was like this, like All for One's greatest disciple and everything, and like, he will do whatever he can to like carry on All for One's, his legacy and everything. And, he's the one that wants to test Tomura to make sure that Tomura is worthy of being All for One's successor and everything. And so we see a lot of that throughout the course of the Meta Liberation War arc. But what happens is, he, like during the time frame, one of the time frames when they're dealing with Gigantomachia, because like he's been running around, like it's been, I don't remember, I know they state specifically like it's been like a couple of weeks or like a month or something like that from when they started to deal with Gigantomachia, with like mainly with Tomura having to fight him, but with like Twice and Toga and Mr. Compress and everything being there as well and helping him. But what else happens is at one point they do get a call from Garaki, and he says, So, have you guys been paying attention to the news? No, we've been being chased around by a giant freaking unstoppable monster. No, we haven't been paying attention to the news. And he's the one that like patches in the call from the Meta Liberation Army from Redestro. And Tomura, after Redestro like puts out the challenge of like you versus us, the League of Villains versus the Meta Liberation Army, blah blah blah. Come and get gear in and see if you can. And what happens is, Tomura explains to Garaki like their plan of like, okay, well, we're gonna send, we're gonna go there first, and then when Makia wakes up, he'll come and track us down. Because every so often, like Makia has to sleep for like 3 hours or something like that, and then Garaki also has like this radio that like he uses to like transmit like All for One's voice to like calm down Gigantamakia at times, which is just kind of funny. It's like catnip for this thing, and like he uses that, but like he also explains to Tomura that he had brought like the League to his lab, including Dobby, and like showed them like we see all of these different Nomus all over the place, and it's like a creepy lab. All these Nomus all over, and like all their different tanks and everything like that. And he's got like his Johnny, the little tiny Nomu that I feel so sorry for, sitting on his lap and everything. And like, I feel so sorry for all of these Nomu. I know that a lot of them are most likely brain dead and they just have like programming in them and they just have like no free will of their own. But I just still feel sorry for them because they don't have a choice in what's going on. I might do a video at some part where I just go through like the Nomu that we've seen, but like I just feel so sorry for the Nomu. So sorry for them. But what else we see is, he's got like all this data and information and everything. So like he's the one that's in control of all of, All for One's secret, monetary stashes all over the place, all of his different bank accounts and everything. And he's just like, okay, well, if you can prove yourself to be, a worthy successor, if Tomura can prove himself to be a worthy successor, then he will, by claiming that showing that he can handle Gigantamakia, then the Doctor will give him all of the assets that he has, and help him and support the League. And of course, Tomura takes the challenge, and that's where he's having to deal with Gigantamakia for quite a while, for like I don't remember exactly how long it is, but it's like a month or something like that. But yeah, he's like testing Tomura's worthiness and his his power over his decay and everything. And he's got the rest of the the rest of the League there as well. And we get like an interesting philosophy going on, discussion that happens there between Tomura and Toga and Twice and everything. Lots of T names associated with the League of Villains. I don't know if that's on purpose or not. But like we see that, and what ends up happening is, it's like this big test to see if Tomura is worthy to carry on All for One's will. I'd say so far he's doing a pretty dang good job of it, unfortunately. But what else we see is, Garaki like watches their progress over the month or however long it is, just watches them and everything. And, when they have to deal with the Meta Liberation Army, he actually, during that time frame, he like wakes up Gigantamakia earlier than he should be, and then sends Gigantamakia to Deka City to help fight, to cause a lot of damage and everything. Like Tomura does prove that he is strong enough to be the successor and everything. And during that time frame is when it's revealed that, oh, well, you see, I actually have a copy of All for One's quirk. Actually, what All for One had was a copy. This is the original with all of the other quirks still inside of it. And after Tomura is proclaimed the new leader of the Meta Liberation Army, of the, the Paranormal Liberation Front or whatever the heck it was called and everything, it's just this whole thing. He's this big part of it as well. He's got all of his Nomu and everything, and he takes Tomura, Garaki takes Tomura, and, sets him all up within, like this whole, I guess, scientific lab or whatever. And he, starts transfusing, All for One, the quirk, into Tomura, and then Tomura also has to go through like this type of he's like in kind of like a coma or something like that for like a couple of months. So his body can be like adjusted to be able to control the quirk and the amount of power that he will have. So yeah, that's fun. Yeah, so we kind of see that. And then I will throw this in here during the Heroes Rising movie, which I know is not canon, but like they do show some references to Garaki and that, and the fact that there is a Nine who is like the guy that has like a copy of One for All, and he can, or All for One, excuse me, a copy of All for One, and he can have up to 9 quirks and everything. And that was implanted by him. That was like a test subject for what would then happen to Tomura. So it's like we kind of see that there. And so there's some of that we see that it's like, oh, 9 was this test subject that Garaki worked on at one point, and then now he has Tomura, and like it was proved, like he saw whatever happened with 9, and then now he's like, okay, well, I can apply that to Tomura. Which I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. During the Endeavor Agency arc, we don't get a huge amount. This is when he's doing the whole operation on Tomura to get him to be able to have All for One inside of him, so that way he can control it, and it's not going to just like destroy his body within an instant of activating it. And he's also like, I think he also works on like making other equipment for like the rest of the gang as well, for the rest of, like getting, Toga, getting like her some new equipment and stuff like that, and like making other Nomus and everything. And during this time frame, he also has to keep, keeping his front up as like this kindly doctor, which is where we get the next big thing that happens for him, and that is the Paranormal Liberation War, where we have, which we saw just the tiniest start of it at the end of the last season, and this next season that's coming up is pretty much, most of that whole season is pretty much going to be the entire freaking war, I'm pretty sure. But it's a long war, so I don't know exactly where they're going to cut that cutoff for the end of that. But like we see him in the manga, we see him go into the hospital, and we saw this in the last anime episode. He goes into the hospital and he's just like talking to one of the nurses, and he's just nice, cheerful, and everything. And what ends up happening is this is when Mirko is going to attack, and she gets into the hospital, and she finds her way to Garaki. That one's actually a clone, and then she finds her way down to like where the actual where all the Nomu are, and like Endeavor at this point in time, because Hawks is of course being a spy, he knows he's probably been introduced to Garaki, or at least knows who Garaki is, and like gets information about all of that and everything, with all of his feathers and everything that he uses to get all this information to Endeavor and to All Might and to everybody else, so they're ready for the big hospital raid. And of course, Mirko is the one that's mainly is the one that goes into the hospital, and she's the one that like fights against all of these Nomu, and like he, the psycho doctor is there, and she's fighting against the Nomu and like destroying them and causing a whole bunch of damage that he is just like, no, my babies, my precious babies. I'm like, they're your fucking science experiments. You should have just let them die. Although I think I've brought this up before in a different video. I don't remember which one, but I think I brought this concept up before, that we know that All Might has been, All Might for 40 years. And that 40 years ago would have been when Nana died. Or just over 40 years ago was when Nana would have died. We know that All for One kept Nana's hands at the very least, because it's stated that like at least 2 of those hands that are on Tomura are Nana's hands, which is disturbing in and of itself. Now, pretty sure that All for One knew that that Nana had a child, had Kotaro, and Tomura wouldn't have been born at that point in time. Tomura, I don't remember if we ever got an exact age on Tomura. I think we have, but he's like in his early 20s. Because like him and Dobby aren't that far apart in age, and they're both like in their early mid-20s at the latest. But we never find out what happened to Nana's body. We know that she is most likely dead. Well, she has to be dead, otherwise she's sitting in a thing with no hands. Prefer to hope that she's dead. But I also would not have been surprised if Garaki tried to do experiments on her to try to turn her into a Nomu, because we don't know when the Nomu experiments 100% started. They may have been going on for years before anything happens, because Kurogiri's been around for a while, you know. But we don't know exactly when all of the experiments started with the Nomu. Maybe, you know, I know that there is a female Nomu, but I don't remember if we ever find out, like, who that female Nomu was. Because there's a bunch of the Nomu that we never found out, like, who they were in real life. Like, who they actually were before they got turned into a Nomu. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm pretty sure this is probably already a theory out there on the internet, because the internet... that I wouldn't be surprised if the female Nomu was Nana. I wouldn't be surprised by that, or if, like, has some remnants of Nana inside of her as, like, parts of her, but I wouldn't be surprised by that. Because I don't remember if we ever find out, you know, the exact, because we don't know the exact origins of, like, every single Nomu, because that'd be a lot of Nomus to know the origins, too. But, one of the things is, of course, you know, during this time frame, Eraserhead and Present Mike are also there to, like, capture, you know, Garaki, and they do. And I'm like, yeah, that's a bit of poetic justice on that part, because he's the one that, like, turned their friend into a puppet. And, like, you know, so they're there, and they're the ones that actually end up, like, getting him out of the hospital and everything. And, you know, one of the things that happens is, you know, Izawa uses erasure on Garaki, and he, like, reveals that, oh no, he does have a quirk, and he, like, ages quite a bit, like, with his quirk turned off, he, like, ages quite a bit. But, like, they get him out of there, and, like, I think at one point, like, he's almost caught up in, like, Tomura's, like, destruction wave, one of the first, like, destruction waves, and, like, he keeps referring to as Tomura, I believe, as his masterpiece. And of course all of the Nomu are, like, his like beloveds and his, like, pets and everything. I just, you know, as I said, I'm gonna do a video at some point where I go through and do all of the different Nomu, because I feel sorry for them. But, like, I kind of want to do a discussion about them as well, for all the ones that we've seen so far. But it's like, I'm not going to deny that Garaki is a smart man. His moral compass is way out of whack. Is way, way, way out of whack. But there's not a huge amount else that we've seen. We've seen, you know, Garaki is currently in prison. We know that because in, like, some of the last couple of chapters of My Hero, we've seen him in prison, kind of being interrogated by some of the other police force or whatever. Like, he's kind of being interrogated by them, like, he's explaining about Dabi's backstory and everything. You know, so we see a lot of that. We know that his Nomus were the ones that caused a lot of damage to Mirko in regards to her arm and her leg. And, you know, so we've learned a fair amount about him over the last several chapters and everything in regards to, Gran Torino is also there during that time frame and, like, helps kind of get, you know, Present Mike and, Garaki out of there. Still don't like Garaki. I highly doubt I will. There are a few members of the League that I do feel somewhat sorry for. Like, I do feel somewhat sorry for Toga with everything that she's been through. And again, I'll probably do a video about Toga at some point. I feel sorry for Dabi with what he went through with Endeavor as a father, and then with everything that happened to him afterwards. But, you know, that's one of the things that they do show with My Hero, is that there's a different thing here, because it's like Shoto and Toya were both in the same situation with Endeavor. And, you know, yeah, there's a few differences in the fact that, like, Toya was, quote unquote, in his mind, replaced by Shoto. But, you know, Shoto was just raised, you know, very similarly, and yet Shoto was making the right choices. Now, that doesn't mean that if Toya was given a chance, he couldn't make the right choices, but, you know, you get enough twisted in your head going on, and it's a lot harder for you to try to make better choices, less evil ones. So, you know, we see Garaki, currently, yeah, he is currently, in custody, still as psychotic as ever. He has the high-end Nomus and everything that he created. He's, you know, the one that implanted All for One into Tomura and put, you know, they did the surgery on him so that way he's able to, like, control it better. You know, he's, you know, currently being held by, you know, the police. He, you know, told them kind of a little bit, like, I don't know if he told them exactly how to deal with Gigantomachia, but he does say that, you know, he says that Gigantomachia is a calamity that lives and dies for the sake of his master, and that all of the Nomu were modeled after him, that they will go and go and go until they die. Which, well, go and go and go until either they die or are given a different order, which is still sad. But, yeah, I don't know exactly what else we're going to get from Garaki. At the moment, I don't really know yet. I don't know if we're going to get any huge more information dumps either by him or about him. I wouldn't complain if he died, but I kind of want him to also suffer for everything that he's done to the Nomus, to a whole bunch of other people and everything. Although I would add in here that if it had been that, like, if he hadn't been able to save All for One's life, because we don't know when they made, like, the duplicate of All for One's quirk, you know, what might have happened was, you know, had All for One died, you know, 5-ish years ago or whatever, 5, 6, whatever years ago it is at this point in time that him and All Might had that huge battle, if All for One had actually died, I don't know, you know, Garaki may have, like, because Tomura was already with, you know, already being raised by All for One at that point in time. So I wouldn't be surprised if Garaki would have just taken Tomura, probably wouldn't have given him the quirk yet, but probably would have raised him. Similarly to what would have happened, the League of Villains probably would have still been created, but All Might wouldn't have then had to fight All for One again so soon. So All Might may have been able to, like, keep his power a little bit longer. Well, not keep his power, because he probably would have still found Izuku, but would have been able to, you know, stay as the #1 hero better, or a little bit longer to allow Izuku more time to train with, you know, train with, you know, All for One, or One for All, just to make it better. But I'm sure there would have still ended up being a conflict that would have happened. Either All Might would have had to fight Tomura, or Izuku would have still ended up having to fight Tomura, as is what's happening now. Well, at the moment, Izuku is currently running over ocean to try to get to where Tomura is, or at least currently at the moment that I'm recording this, that's what's going on. Before this video goes up, that might change, and Izuku may have arrived at the fight, and tried to fight Tomura. But I don't really think we're going to get any more information about Garaki. If we do, it'll probably just be like whatever type of a sentence that he gets, or it's revealed that, oh, I have this other twisted thing that I made, which wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. So, that's what I have for this discussion. One very twisted doctor that would make Dr. Frankenstein very happy. Although I wouldn't be surprised if Garaki is somewhat based on Frankenstein, with the fact that they've both mutilated dead bodies, which is fun. No. So, that's what I have. I thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Sorry. Good thing I'm done talking. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope that you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.
What a childish daydream. Saying all that with such a straight face was quite impressive. Very well, Tomura Shigaraki. I'll help you out. Show me you mean it. Prove to me that you can make your villainous pipe dreams a reality.